Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to Female Filmmakers Fuse with Alexa Polar and Robin Pabello, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hi, thank you for listening to Female Filmmakers Fuse. I'm your host, Alexa Polar. To call in, the number is 818-602-4929. Again, that's 818-602-4929. Sorry, I'm late. You can listen to it on the app, LA Talk Radio app. That's free to download, and you can listen to it online via their website. Let's see. Sorry. And if you would like to be a part of the elevator pitch, the deadline for that is the 1st of April. So you still have a chance to submit your short film. If you wish to submit your short film, you can do so. Today, our guest is Bri. Let me get her on. Hi, Bri. Are you there? Hello? Can you hear me? I think we got disconnected. Let me get help here. One sec.
Yeah,
I'll have to
mic's
call.
not working either.
Bri, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, there you go. Hi, Bri. How can you? I'm sorry.
Hi.
How do you say your last name?
Castellini.
Castellini. And Bri, you're
Yep.
in New York, correct?
I am based in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. I've been there. I crossed the Brooklyn Bridge. That was pretty interesting. So, Bri, you're a filmmaker, and you have your own podcast as well. What's the name of your podcast?
So I have two. One that I do for work called Forget the Box, where I interview web series creators and people in the digital media industry and talk about how to make better digital content and make a career for yourself. And then I have another podcast that I just started called Bri and Chris Are Depressed, which is a companion comedy mental health podcast to go along with my web series, Sam and Pat Are Depressed. So me and my co-star and co-executive producer from the web series started a podcast where we basically talk about mental health and talk about the production of the show and how those things sort of intersect and take questions from listeners and viewers and that kind of stuff. And so it's become sort of its own little thing, which I'm really proud of.
Okay, and where can people find your podcast?
You can find both podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, basically anywhere. If you just search for Forget the Box or search for Bri and Chris Are Depressed, they should be on all the major platforms. That's
really great. I think that it's pretty sad how our medical industry treats mental illness. And it's something that I've been discussing for a while now, and I feel like there should be a change, especially when it comes to our insurance. So a lot of people don't know this, but like with insurance, especially, they don't cover it for the most part. If they do, there's only a certain amount that they cover or certain types of help that they cover. Now, when it comes to people that do take their lives, for example, if they have a life insurance, the life insurance doesn't help out the family because they don't recognize it as something that was detrimental with mental health. And so when someone has a life insurance and it deals with that, unfortunately, it causes a ripple effect. And I think that should change when it comes to life insurance, because it's like a further punishment for taking your own life instead of helping the person out that is having that sort of issue. Is that something you would agree with, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there is a huge disparity between the way that we treat physical health and the way that we treat mental health in our country, both on like obviously a pretty tangible insurance level, but also in sort of the cultural level. And that's really what both my podcast and my web series are trying to sort of combat, is this idea that, first of all, that mental health only happens to like weak people or people who just aren't trying hard enough to get out of their own heads. And also, we really want to specifically talk about therapy and about how a lot of people assume, and a lot of media assumes, that therapy is something you do in crisis and then it like cures you after a while and then you're all good. And while certainly some people go to therapy for a short amount of time because of a trauma or a particular situation, there's also, a growing number of Americans that find that ongoing therapy, even outside of crisis, is incredibly helpful and incredibly beneficial, and not something that you should feel, weird about, and not something that you should feel ashamed for. And so a big part of our web series and our podcast is just talking about the fact that needing help doesn't make you weak. Needing help and admitting you need help and seeking out help makes you incredibly strong, and you should have a support system from your culture and the media that you consume that sort of benefits you and helps you make those decisions, instead of being afraid that needing something is going to make you look bad.
Mm-hmm. No, totally agree. I had sorry, my mic seems kind of wonky right now. I deal with stuff like that all the time too, when it comes to mental health and whatnot. There we go. That's why it is. I gotta go on this side of the mic. I deal with that personally, so I take it personal. But I found that trying, to find an out or who you can trust and talk to, which I have a great support system. They know who they are. They've been there for me while I have some negativity around, and so it's trying to eliminate the negative, and sometimes that's a process too. I was shared, someone that helps me out a lot had shared a quote or a meme, I guess you could say, and it says, "Your energy speaks volumes." Whenever you're with someone, notice how you feel. Notice if you feel guarded, sad, and uncomfortable. That's a sign that maybe you shouldn't spend much time with them. If you feel light, comfortable, safe, and happy, it's most likely a sign that this person is great for you. And so she shared that with me today, and I was like, wow, the perfect timing to share this. And so it's just it's interesting because it's true. Sometimes you have to let go of the baggage and move on, especially if it's causing you to just not be happy, to not, if it's not an equal thing, both sides, then it's not an equal thing, both sides. It's time to move on.
Hey,
and
Bri.
get going.
This is Robin. How are you? I'm sorry I'm late.
Hi, Robin.
Hey. Yeah, no, I think that mental illness and mental awareness for our society is very difficult because you're right. They only think in crisis mode, and it's an ongoing thing, and it's an internal thing. And people sometimes cannot see it, like, oh, she's got a smile on her face, she must be fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It's something deeper. It's something that I think that people aren't able to recognize because, we put up a guard. We try to show our best self because, we're a product of our environment, and it's the whole thing with social media. My life is great. Look what I have. But, again, you don't know what somebody's internally struggling with. So I think that by having these kind of platforms to share, it's what we need, and the more we can share it with other people to make it aware, then that's something that, it's hopefully gonna hit to the right people. I just recently worked on something where it was with veterans and how, they don't have enough, support from our government, and like society's gotten better in supporting veterans and like housing them and finding jobs for them. But a lot of them are, they have, PTSD, and, they need that mental health. They need the support because they've seen things and done things that, not a civilian has done, and it affects you. So whether it's something that's been caused by a trauma, or something that's internal that you've struggled with your whole life.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I also think that a lot of people in regards to the thing about, putting your best foot forward, is that a lot of people have a lot of like internal shame about why they feel so bad. Mm-hmm. People tend to think that like only if these things happen to you, you are considered depressed enough to admit you're depressed. You know, like if you have a roof over your head and a decent job, or if you're a student and you don't have any of your own expenses, or, a myriad of things that you consider like, oh, this means I'm fine. It makes it even harder to reach out for help, because you're like, well, nothing terrible has happened to me. Like, I didn't watch a classmate get shot in front of me. I'm fine. Like, how dare I be depressed? How dare I take up space in the mental health community and take up space in this therapist's office? And I think that's so dangerous for the same reasons that it's dangerous to assume that therapy is only useful in crisis. Like, mental health affects different people in different ways, and comparing, your mental health to someone else doesn't do either of you any good.
Yeah, no,
assuming
absolutely.
that you're not allowed to be depressed is what keeps depressed people from seeking help. And you're allowed to be depressed. And that's something that we really try to tackle in both the web series and the podcast, is that there are different levels to everything. And just because your foot hurts less than someone else's foot hurts doesn't mean that you shouldn't go get that checked out. Same way with mental health.
Yeah, I mean, it's based on case by cases. I don't think that there should be comparisons, and I think that's part of the problem. I mean, I had someone tell me once, like, oh, you don't know what depression is. And I was like, okay, tell me what you think it is, or how you take it. You know what I mean? Because there are different levels of it, and it depends on each person's, internal struggle.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I also had someone once tell me that if you're going to kill yourself, just do it already. So it depends on their expectations on how they think they're helping you when they're causing more damage than not. And it's weird because they don't realize what they're doing. That's why you have people like on, what's it called? You see cases like this all the time where they're taunted by other people. And then when they finally do it, they're surprised when it comes back to them. There are cases where, and sometimes it doesn't go anywhere because that's just how the government works, where there's, I don't have proof of that. It was verbal. But, there's other people that have it on social media, that have it on where they're attacking, and it's bullying and cyberbullying and whatnot. And then most of them are kids, unfortunately, end up taking their lives. And it's, you have a string of comments saying, do it, just kill yourself already or whatnot. And it's not something you should say to someone, especially, it doesn't matter if they're depressed or not. You should just not say that to someone, ever. And it's been, when the parent finds out about it and then goes to the courts or whatnot and says, this person was bullying my child, or this person was bullying this person, doesn't have to be a child necessarily, and they ended up taking their lives. How many cases have we seen that's like that? It's insane. So
yeah, and I think so much of it just comes from a lack of understanding. Like, people don't take it seriously. Mm-hmm. They don't take saying things like that seriously. They don't take people saying, how they feel seriously, because if we can't tangibly see something, people have a really hard time, based on the way that we've treated, mental illness for so long, seeing it as a real problem. If you can hide it, say, people think, well, then you must be fine. And that's not how that works. That's not how brain chemistry works. And it's, I think, really dangerous. And so hopefully something that, our art and our podcast are putting out into the world is a different perspective.
No, it's really good. And do you get a lot of people that are contacting you for help or seeking out advice?
Yeah, actually, we were really excited when we announced that we were doing this podcast. Each episode of the web series covers a different observational therapy humor. So, it'll be things like making small talk with your therapist and the anxiety around that, or thinking that a story that you've told is too depressing for your therapist. And so each of the episodes of the podcast covers that same theme, and we talk about the episode, but then we also talk about our own experiences with making small talk with a therapist, depressing your therapist, etc. And so each time we put out a call for questions, does anyone else have questions about how to introduce yourself to new therapists, or things like that. And we had so many questions for people just asking for therapy advice, people who never really got to talk to anyone else about the decision to go into therapy and to seek professional mental health help. And it was so like heartening that people cared and that people really wanted some guidance, because they're not getting it anywhere else. And that's sad. It's sad that two, idiot New York podcasters are the ones that are having to field some of these really tough questions. But we are, grateful that we get to help. And we actually, when we were crowdfunding for season 2 of our web series, someone reached out to us and mentioned that they were donating explicitly because as we were doing the show, we inspired her to go back to therapy, which is just the greatest piece of like validation for art ever. Like, I'm glad people think it's funny, whatever, but like the fact that we managed to help someone see that they really wanted to go back to therapy and there was no shame in it, like that is the greatest gift. And I'm so grateful to have been a part of that journey, and hopefully we will only go and help more people like that.
I think that for me personally, and I'm not speaking for others, but I find ways to cope, and I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like others do it as well. And it's sort of like a self-help, self-soothing as well. So if I'm going through a down phase or, going through that time where I'm thinking thoughts that I don't want to think, I find ways to alleviate those thoughts. I find excuses to get out of those thoughts. And I think it's interesting because, like, when there's celebrities that end up taking their lives and you hear all the same comments, but he was so funny, like Robin Williams, and there was another comedian that recently committed suicide, and they're like, he was always funny, he always had a smile on and all this stuff, and they make up all this stuff like the people that laugh the hardest are the ones that are crying the inside. And I'm thinking if I was them, and not that I but I'm trying to say, like, I feel like maybe that was their way of trying to cope with it, because I find that I do things that I try to cope with it until you can't cope anymore, and then you got to find another outlet. I could be wrong, but that's how I deal with it. Do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the person, obviously, and I also think that, like, a lot of what people find helpful from therapy is not necessarily that hour a week where you're speaking to a mental health professional, but the strategies that you develop in therapy that allow you to better manage and cope with your the various things happening to you in your day-to-day life. Like my co-host Chris Terry and my co-star in the show, he has been in therapy consistently for the past almost 4 years. And in the last episode of the podcast, which comes out in 2 weeks, I think, I don't quite remember, in the 9th episode, he talks about like the specific coping strategies that his therapists have helped him, develop and manage, and how exactly that has like positively impacted his life. And it's not about like having a place to go necessarily. I also think people have this sense that like the reason that therapy is helpful is because once a week you get like somebody to listen to you. And while that's certainly useful for a lot of people, a lot of what therapy does is just prepares you for the other 6 days of the week. It prepares you for every other hour of the week that you're not in therapy. And I think that is a huge benefit that people sometimes don't think about. And sometimes that's why people are only in therapy temporarily, because they get a great strategy, they figure it out, and then they don't need it anymore. And that's great. But also there are people who find it very helpful to continue going back. And I think that giving people the opportunity to find out what works for them so that they can be set up for success in their day-to-day life is the best sort of thing that we can do for our society.
Now, do you get anyone that's ever asked about medication like antidepressants? Because I personally don't feel like they help me. I don't take them. I've taken them before and they didn't do anything. And I felt exactly the same way while I was on them. I just had to pretend like I wasn't feeling the same exact way because I didn't want a higher dosage of something that wasn't doing anything that they told me would help. And it's weird because one of the side effects of all antidepressants are thoughts of suicide, and I that always gets to me because you're taking something to not feel depressed. But do you ever get some people like that are discussing or asking about antidepressants, like how they help some and maybe not others? Because for me personally, it doesn't help me.
they haven't helped. Yeah. And I'm sorry that was the experience you had. I know, like, I've never been on medication. I've talked to doctors about it, but it just hasn't ever really lined up.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris is not on medication either. And we actually tackle that pretty specifically in season 2 of the web series, which comes out on March 25th. So end of this month, we're launching the season 2, and it's a season that explicitly talks about one of the characters deciding to go or not go on medication, and all of the things that sort of have to have, all the conversations you have to have before doing that, and the ways in which you worry that you're going to be changed or you're not going to be changed, and how both of those paths and those options bring up new complications. So that's something we definitely felt compelled to explore, and hopefully that it'll start another conversation and make people more, aware of their options in that area as well.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, because I've always wondered that with other people, because I have my parents, and they've given them antidepressants, or during difficult times in their lives. And sometimes when we go back to the doctors and I'm with them and they say, how are you feeling? Are you depressed? Are you stressed out? And sometimes my parents are like, yeah, I'm stressed out right now, or whatever. And then they're like, do you want to go back on these antidepressants, or do you want to try new ones? And my parents look at me and they're like, they didn't do anything for me. I don't want to be on that medicine. Because for sometimes I've, and I'm not knocking it. I feel like everyone's different. So it might help others. But I know that other people feel like they're in a fog. And that's how my parents felt. Like they felt like they weren't able to have any emotion, even happy ones. So they felt like this isn't for me.
There's a fine tune, though. There really is, because I have family members that are bipolar, and they've been diagnosed with different kind of mental health issues. And for some it works, and for some it doesn't. I think that it does. Either way, I support whichever direction they're going to go with. But my thing is that medication, it takes time. It's like antibiotics. It's going to take 2 weeks for it to adjust and normalize in your body, and it's going to take 2 weeks to see any kind of changes. Just kind of like if you're losing weight or you're to change your diet. They're all things that take time, and I feel that sometimes people don't have the patience to see that. So it depends on how each person is going to personally react to it, whether it's their chemicals or the way they eat or their lifestyle. So, it's a combination of things.
I was on it for nearly a year and it didn't do anything.
And that's good, because you were able to recognize that. For my aunt, unfortunately, when her doctor changed one of her medications, there was a variance in her life, and her daughters, it was very noticeable, and they were extremely concerned, and they were very upset because they noticed their mother struggling. So for me, I mean, I've dealt with it my whole life. I've seen it. It's something that is a case-by-case basis. It just depends on each individual, and it depends on the severity as well, if they're able to recognize it, because
there's also a lot of different kinds of medication that different people react to different types of, suppressants differently, that kind of stuff. Have you guys seen Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, the CW show?
Yeah.
I think I saw a couple episodes. So, yeah.
Are you guys caught up?
I'm not.
But you can spoil it. It's fine.
No, I won't spoil it. I will say that the stuff that you're talking about, like the going into a fog, that kind of stuff, is very much the experience of Rachel Bloom's character in season 1 of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and this most recent season that I think only the first half has aired so far, but they go pretty heavily into the decision for her to either go back on medication or change some things up, because she had also had a fear of I want to be able to feel things. I don't want to just numb everything. And through a lot of therapy and a lot of group therapy and understanding her actual diagnosis, she kind of comes to the decision that maybe she should try something different. But just because one thing doesn't work, another thing doesn't work. And I'm not on medication, so I can't obviously speak from personal experience, but from what I understand about other people who've gone on medication who have been helped very much from it, and from people who've gone on medication and hate it You know, it depends on every different person's diagnosis. It depends on the type of medication you go on, the amount of medication you go on, because, you know, some people might take a certain amount of Lexapro and be fine, and some people might need double that or half that or things like that. And it's a really hard balance to balance out your brain chemistry. And it's probably another one of those things where physical health is kind of easy to figure out, like, is your ankle healing or is it not? But mental illness is a lot less tangible, and so it's a lot harder for people to come up with like cocktails that'll work for different people's neurochemistry, and that's too bad. And I hope that someday we can start putting more research into that kind of stuff versus, you know, anything else, and hopefully that'll be more helpful as people decide to or not to go on medication.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And not to sway out of the conversation, because I'm sure we're going to sway back into it, but I also want to talk about your short film Ace, Ace and Anxiety.
Ace and Anxious.
Anxious, sorry. Ace and Anxious. I watched it. It's really, you have over 20,000 views, correct?
I think we actually just hit 40.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's been ever since last year on during Pride Month. It has like exploded. It was at 39 the last time I looked at it. Oh yeah, it's at 39,940 views as of right now.
Wow.
So in 60 views, we'll hit 40,000.
Okay, we need 60 viewers to go and watch.
We got to do that. That's our goal. But it's really good. It's really entertaining, and you hit a topic that a lot of people don't really discuss or know that it exists, which is about asexuality. Why don't you explain to our listeners what being asexual means?
Sure. So just like any other sexuality, asexuality is in itself a spectrum, but it is characterized by a lack, or mostly a lack, of sexual interest and sexual desire. So for some people, that means that, you know, they do not find, they do not experience sexual attraction, I think, is the sort of boiling down point. There's been a lot of conversation within the community about what specifically defines it. But yeah, in general, it is a lack of sexual attraction. So you might have some asexual people have sexual desire, but it isn't targeted to a particular person. Some people have sex in committed relationships or for other reasons. Some asexual people masturbate, some people don't. It's just a lack of sexual attraction to other people that is what sort of defines asexuality. There's also aromanticism, which is not something I explored in the film, but is sometimes conflated, because aromanticism is naturally a lack of romantic interest in other people. So those aromantic people may enjoy sex and may experience sexual attraction, or they may be both asexual and aromantic. It's kind of confusing, but essentially it just means that you have no sexual attraction and more than likely have a low to non-existent like sex drive and libido. Mm-hmm. Although, of course, again, that changes from person to person. And yeah, I think the most recent estimates, there's like 1% of the population identify as asexual, but as are most things, because it's on a spectrum, that percentage probably changes as people understand it more and understand where they lie on it. There are gray asexual people, for example. That's the terminology for someone who experiences sexual attraction only occasionally or very rarely. There are also people who, you know, only find themselves sexually attracted to a partner if they've been with that person for a long time. So until they have formed a strong emotional or romantic connection, they will experience sexual attraction, but not before that.
It's interesting. You're going deep with your stuff, huh? With your with your projects.
There's not, like, to your point, there's not a lot of info out there. So if somebody's got to put the info out, then I have the opportunity. No,
that's true, and you did it, and it's entertaining. It was well done, and I thought it was clever. It's funny how she posted an ad on Craigslist for that, and how she was having interviews for it. I don't want to spoil it for people, but it was good.
Wait, before you tell any more, where can listeners find it and view it so you have more views?
Yes. So Ace and Anxious is on YouTube at Undead Burrito Productions YouTube channel. It is also on Vimeo. It's got like 5,000 views there. So technically, overall, it's gotten 40,000, but on YouTube specifically, it's only at 39 so far. It's also actually streaming on Revry TV.
Nice.
Revry is an LGBTQ streaming platform. It's actually behind a paywall, but if you have a Revry subscription, it is, as far as I know, the only piece of asexual content in their library right now. If you search asexual, that's all that comes up.
Wow.
Okay.
Well,
but,
that should change,
honored to be a part of it in any case.
No, it's interesting. And how did you come across that? And without you having to delve into too personal, I'm just saying, like, because I know about it, I've heard about it, but I know a lot of people that don't know what that means or what it is. And so is it something that you came across? How did you come up with that?
Inspiration?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind going personal. I was on a queer podcast last week where I talked about it a lot. So I am myself asexual. I discovered it in 2015, only after not having heard of it, which is, sort of a central problem in learning to identify myself is I had to know that that was an identity option. And that was something that really stuck out to me as like a frustration. Like the only reason that I spent so much of my life not really understanding what was going on is because the option that I wasn't on any of the tests, like I representation matters, because if you don't see yourself represented, like you can't possibly, in some cases, understand what's going on. And so learning that I was asexual really clarified a lot of things for me. Mm-hmm. And I made a pact with myself to make sure that I put some representation out into the world so that maybe one or two other people will learn about it earlier than I did and be able to incorporate that into their life until it's, before it gets out of hand. And so that was obviously a big inspirational moment for me. But also, in my mind, honestly, Ace and Anxious is much more a film about anxiety, which is something I also suffer from. Yeah. Obviously, we spent like the first half hour of this conversation talking about mental health. It's obviously something I'm very passionate about. But yeah, I think anxiety over depression, although I definitely have depression, on occasion, but anxiety is more my brand of mental health issue. And I remember being incredibly frustrated by the idea that I can't cure that. And that's another thing about mental health that people don't think about, is that like these things like anxiety and depression don't go away, even with a successful medication regimen, even with weekly therapy. It never goes away. You just learn to deal with it better. You learn to, get your brain chemistry balanced more. But like, at the end of the day, anxiety isn't necessarily attached to anything. It just happens at random. You can't plan for it. You can't change it. You can't cure it. It's just always there. And for a character like Emma, and for a person like me, Emma is the main character of Ace and Anxious, that was an incredibly frustrating idea. So when she started having an uptick of panic attacks in the film, she decided, well, I've got to do something about this. So her tactic was, well, I learned that sex can actually, release stress because of endorphins and all sorts of other stuff. So she's like, well, I'm asexual, and obviously I'm not having sex. So maybe one of the ways that I could manage my stress is just something that never occurred to me, because I'm not, I don't experience sexual attraction. So maybe I figured it out. Maybe I figured out a cure for my anxiety. And so she decides to put an ad on Craigslist for free sex to interview potential partners to help her test out the sort of scientific stress-relieving properties of sex, and hilarity ensues. But centrally in this film and in my life is the conflict that not being able to do anything to like fix something is incredibly frustrating. That lack of control in anxiety is just, it's overwhelming sometimes, because even if you get a little better, you're never going to be cured, and that is unacceptable. What do you mean I can't solve this problem? You can make the problem easier, but you can't solve it. And so that is something that the character and myself definitely struggle with. And so I wanted to make this film to sort of humorously look at one of the ways in which this woman tries to take back some control over her own life.
No, and it was, like I said, it was well done. You wrote it, and
thank you.
Did you direct it as well, correct?
I did. I wrote, directed, produced, and edited it.
Wow. And it looked really great. I do suggest others to watch it. I'm going to watch it again. Thank
you.
I'll watch it for the first time, so I'll be a new view.
But it was good. I'll try to watch it from different accounts. How's that? But
Perfect.
But it was really good. I did enjoy it, and I enjoyed the fact that you hit a topic that not, like I said, many know about. I think the first time I read about it, and it's weird to bring this up now because I'm not trying to bring any controversy, and I don't agree with it on this aspect. But the first time I read about it was someone had wrote and said that Michael Jackson was asexual, and that's why you didn't see him with anyone. And I thought that was interesting. And I didn't really care about that. I was like, what the heck does that mean? So that's when I looked up asexual, and that's when I learned what it was. But I thought that was interesting, and that's how it was brought to my attention. And that was years ago. I didn't think anything of it. And then with the whole anxiety thing, I thought was clever and interesting because I do that all the time. My brother always makes fun of me and says, shake a leg, because my leg would just start shaking automatically. And sometimes I don't even notice it until I look down. I'm like, oh, okay. So usually I get other people that bring it to my attention. I've had it where I'm sitting at a booth in a restaurant and I'm doing it, and the people that are sitting behind me come and they're like, can you please stop? You're making us nauseous. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize it, So it's just like one of those things where it just comes naturally. And I jokingly one time said, I have restless leg syndrome.
This is before it was.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden I saw a commercial for people with restless leg syndrome, and I was like, what is going on? Because I don't think I have that. It's just like what you said. It's anxiety. I fidget a lot when I get nervous. I'm antisocial. And I'm okay with that. It's one of those weird things where it takes me a while.
Not weird.
For me, I'm saying, like, it takes me a while where people that know me later, and they're like, I can't believe how long it took for you to come out and start talking to us, because you were just in a corner. And then all of a sudden, once you get to know me and I'm comfortable enough, then good luck shutting me up. But
this is true.
But is that does it? Because I feel like it's weird, because this is the first time we're talking. Obviously through the podcast. I was talking to you via emails, and I had no idea what this conversation was going to be like, and I feel like we have a lot in common without saying too much. And it's interesting because you're like, you base anxiety off of what you've gone through, and I'm thinking, like, does her legs shake like the character's legs shake? Because my legs are shaking right now. So it's just like really weird and interesting. And it's always good to find similarities with people, because then you're not the only one going through it. That was my point.
Yeah, I mean, it brings you back to that representation conversation. Like, people talk about representation in media pretty much only about, like, gender and race, which are obviously incredibly important. And her shout out to Captain Marvel that came out on Friday. I saw it on Saturday, and it was incredible. I have not enough good time. I don't have enough time to say all the good things, but also I think that people often, especially people who are like upset that we're having conversations about representation in media, often don't think about the fact that representation doesn't just mean like gender, race, and sexuality more and more. It means so many other things. Yeah. Like, if you don't see a nuanced look at mental health portrayed, then you'll think that something is wrong with you.
Right.
In the same way that a closeted gay teenager will think something's wrong with them if they never see a gay character on TV. They, assume that doesn't exist, and so they must be wrong. And the same thing can be applied to any other type of person. And so that's why I feel really passionately about telling stories from my own experience and my own perspective in new ways, so that hopefully the more perspectives that are out there, the more opportunity somebody who feels lost actually gets to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that in stride, I think we're making progress, but I think that it's not. My thing keeps falling off the microphone. I swear it's not me.
Just leave it down.
I will. Sorry. So I think that in small strides, which it needs to be in larger, companies are making efforts to kind of have that involvement and awareness and educating, people in society. But like I said, it has to be broad stream, which is kind of nice because we're seeing small progressions. And you're right, it has to be across the board on every level. And thankfully we have people like you that are doing that. And we have people like Alexa that are supporting people like you that are able to like get more views or just share this information, and it just needs to continue in lifting people up.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, we never actually tapped into, what inspired you to be a filmmaker.
Yeah, what did inspire you to be a filmmaker?
A podcast, actually. Funny enough. So I've been a writer since I was a kid. My first story was at 5 years old, so I always knew I wanted to be a writer. And even through college, I was pretty consistently a prose and poetry writer. I, wrote a novel for my senior thesis, that kind of stuff.
Wow.
But in between junior and senior year, I was rollerblading and listening to a podcast called The Writers Panel. Have you guys heard The Writers Panel podcast? It used to be Nerdist Writers Panel.
Yes, I heard. Yes.
Yeah, the Writers Panel podcast. And so I was listening to an episode, I think it was with the New Girl writers. And I was listening to them talk, and I was rollerblading around my hometown in the summer. And I was just, as they were talking, I was like, this is the exact kind of writing that I want to do.
Nice.
I always had trouble doing, scene descriptions and, character descriptions. I was just like, I just want to get to the dialogue part. And I was listening to this podcast talking about people writing dialogue and writing, a show that I loved. And I thought, holy crap, I think that's what I want to do. So I applied to one graduate program and I got in, and it was the LIU Brooklyn Writing and Producing for Television MFA. So that's why I moved to Brooklyn after I graduated from college. Nice. I got my MFA, and in that MFA class, there was one class that I am actually now teaching as an adjunct for digital media, where you had to produce a web series pilot, because they wanted to impress upon us that there were, lots of different types of television writing, not just on NBC, but there were, short form television writing options out there. And I made the pilot for my first web series, Brains, in that class. And then me and a couple friends decided, well, that was really fun. We should keep doing it. So we made 2 seasons of Brains, my first web series. And now I'm on my second season of Sam and Pat Are Depressed. I made Ace and Anxious, and I have another short film coming out, directing another web series in May called Better With You, which is by an all-female production team based in Utah. So that's really fun. And yeah, it all just sort of like coupled on top of each other. Started with a podcast, realized I wanted to write that style, and then fell in love with being able to make it myself.
And I think you're being modest right now. Everyone needs to know you are an award-winning filmmaker. So let's just put that out there. Your content has won awards, so it's not, you're good at what you're doing. It wasn't a happy accident. I mean, it was, and it's turning into a success. And it's helping people out. You're bringing to light a lot of topics that most people wouldn't know exist or wouldn't feel comfortable with talking about. And here we are talking about it. So that's a good thing, so. Yeah,
I'm honored to be a part of the whole process. Yeah, Ace and Anxious is the thing that has won the most awards. So I'm glad that you watched it and enjoyed it. Because, yeah, that's been our big award winner for us to help propel us into other things. And we actually got a lot of our audience that way. I mean, we've got 40,000 views now on YouTube, but a lot of people have subscribed to the broader YouTube channel as a result of Ace and Anxious, awesome. And have found our other work as a result of that. And so it's been a really fun way to develop an audience in a really consistent way.
Oh, that's great. It's no, I really, really did enjoy it, and that's why I do encourage others to watch it. And I'm gonna, attach a link to it with this as well. That way, if anyone listens to this later, they'll know, like, hit the link and you can watch it there. So let's get it to past the 40, and I'm pretty sure it will, because it's really that good. Besides what you're filming now, do you have any other plans in the near future with other projects, and what do you have plans with your podcast as well?
Yeah, so season 1 of our podcast comes to an end the same day that season 2 of the web series launches, and so we do plan to bring the podcast back at least for a second season to go through the episodes of Sam and Pat season 2. So once Sam and Pat launches on March 25th, last Monday of the month, we'll probably take a short hiatus from the podcast so that we can start recording again, and then release the podcast probably early summer. And like I mentioned, I'm directing a new web series called Better With You. It's a Halloween rom-com. We're shooting in May, and then they're hoping to release it the month of October, and that'll be really fun. It'll be my first time working with an all-female team, which I'm really excited about, and I'm also getting to film outside of New York, and I love not being in New York. New York has been great, but also, boy howdy, I got to get out of New York more often. So I'm really excited to go to Utah for a couple of weeks and film that series. And I have a short film that will hopefully be hitting the festival circuit soon. It's a psychological thriller called Buy-In. and it is about it's a psychological thriller about multi-level marketing schemes. Okay. And I co-wrote it with my good friend Colin Hinckley, who actually plays Kevin in Ace and Anxious. He's the redhead best friend in Ace and Anxious, so he is a writer as well. And so we co-wrote the project. He acted in it, and I directed it, and it's very different from the other stuff that I've done. Not comedic at all. Well, it's a little comedic. I couldn't help myself. And so that's hopefully going to start making its rounds in the next couple of months as we research more horror festivals. And that's what I got so far. New web series season comes out March 25th. Buy-in will come out eventually, and I'm directing a new thing in May that will hopefully come out in October.
It's awesome.
Oh, it sounds all really good. It sounds really, really good. Really promising, and it will lead you to more things. So that's what's great about it.
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, I mean, I kind of feel it. I mean, like you said, look what your short film did for you. I mean, it's leading them to your website. It's leading them to see other projects you guys have done. Your podcast and web series is helping others as well. I mean, it's driving them to want to donate to your campaign. So that's a huge thing too. And your campaign ended, or is it still going?
So for Sam and Pat?
Yes.
Yeah, so that was last August. Actually, Better With You, the rom-com that I'm directing for, is crowdfunding currently, and we haven't quite met our goal there yet, but we've got a couple more weeks, so hopefully somebody helps us out. But yeah, that one's currently going on Seed and Spark. But yeah, the Sam and Pat one was over last July, I believe.
Okay.
And where can you just shout out so that way any listeners that want to donate can find you?
Sure, yeah. Seed and Spark is basically where I do all of my crowdfunding, because Seed and Spark is a group of wonderful, wonderful people. Better With You is currently crowdfunding on it. It is a all-female production team rom-com set during Halloween.
Better With You. I like it.
Better With You. Yeah, it's about introverts and extroverts trying to compromise when they decide they, really like each other. So it's a fun play in Halloween, but it's also very much rooted in something that I feel very passionately about. So I'm very introverted. People often are surprised by that, but I'm very introverted. And I've had extroverted close friends before, and it's always a struggle to try and make sure that everyone is happy and comfortable, but also getting what they need out of a relationship. And so I'm really excited to work on this my first rom-com, actually, and get to explore that.
And it's based during Halloween?
Yes, it takes place during the month of Halloween.
Nice. So that's really cool. So introvert, that's also how I see myself as. It's kind of funny because you're hitting a lot of topics that hit it right on the head, right there, the nail right on the head. So it's just like, what is going on?
You guys are
it's like, get out of my head. It's just like,
no, you can't make me.
But no, that's really cool. Yeah, you're right though. You just mentioned something. It's true. It's kind of difficult to have a friendship, kinship, relationship, anything when you're two very polar opposites, like introverts and extroverts. It's very huge difference because one's extremely outgoing, always want to be out there doing stuff, whatever, and then the other one is just like, no.
Yeah, no, it's funny. So the script was written by Amanda Taylor and is going to be shot and co-produced by Kaylee Brown, and they're the leaders of Apple Juice Productions, which is the production company making this project. And Amanda is the extrovert and Kaylee is the introvert. Yeah. And so I think Amanda wrote this as sort of a love story to their friendship, talking about how there are ways to compromise as an extrovert and introvert, but you just got to work at it a little bit. And so I'm really excited to work with them and bring their love story to life.
That sounds adorable.
How did you come across them? How did you guys meet? Are they in Utah as well or New York?
So they're in Utah, but a producer from one of their past projects lives in New York, and we were connected just because I do a lot of work in the web series community, since that's my day job at Bearable. Mm-hmm. And so I met their producer, and we had become friends, and then eventually we became kind of internet acquainted with each other, mm-hmm. and became really big fans of each other's works. And so when the opportunity arose and they needed a director for their next series, I was like, I know I'm in New York, but I would love to try out. And they were like, yes. We will make it a priority yes. to get you out here. We would love to work with you.
That's awesome. I love that.
That's
yeah,
great.
it was so cool.
It's a good connection. It's always funny too, because like obviously, you know, you're in New York, they're in Utah. You guys connected, you know, via social media, and then you know, then you guys get to actually meet up in real life and actually have.
Yeah, no, I never actually I still haven't met a couple of them. I met Amanda, the screenwriter and the lead actress of this web series. She came out to New York for a couple of weeks, but like we had already agreed to work together. We'd already known each other for 3 years. So when we met in person, it was like, oh right, we haven't done this yet. Hi.
The age of technology. That's so funny. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is, and I always find it. I get anxious when I'm meeting someone for the first time that I've been talking to, whether it was online or via the phone, and on a professional setting. And it's kind of like, it's weird because you almost had this first date type of meeting, even though that's not what it is. But professionally, I guess you can say it's sort of like a professional first date. And I'm that person that's just like, okay, this is going to be weird. What do I say? What do I say? Even though you've said everything. You know, before meeting, and it's just like one of those things where it's just like, I got to get over this, because I've met a couple people like that, like actresses and whatnot, and we're talking a lot online, and then when we meet in person, I'm like, okay, I'm nerve-wracked because I don't know how this is gonna go. Like, you know, what if she doesn't like my idea anymore? What if she sees me and she's like, you're fucking weird, and walks away or something like that? It's just like
I think that's hilarious because it's very true, and I've actually seen it. She like literally, her demeanor is just like, and I'm the complete opposite. Like I can talk to anybody at any place at any time. I'm just
oh my god, that's such a superpower. I'm so jealous.
That somebody just told me that too, and I was just like, I mean, I'm shy, but I mean, if I hear a conversation, then I'm like, ooh, I can talk about that. Like I'm interested in this and like want to share and hear more about it. So,
but here's my thing though, if I'm angry, I do not care if it's in person, over the phone, over the internet. You will be scared.
This is I'm
a scary, angry person. I know how to hurt people with words, and I use them, and that's I guess my superpower, and it's a blessing and what is it called? A blessing and
a blessing and a curse.
A blessing and a curse. I've made people cry. Over the week, my car wouldn't start, and I called to get the, you know,
your battery changed.
I called to get it fixed, and the person was on the phone and was just like, I need you to tell me how many miles your car has. And I'm like, okay, it doesn't start. I can't see the miles. Can you tell me how you would like me to do this? And so she said, oh, okay, well, I guess, could you guess? And I was like, could you just put something in the system right now? Like, she can't because the battery won't turn. And she's like, well, can you just guess? And I was like, okay. And I threw out a number. She was like, can you guess another guess? And that's when I lost it. I lost my cool. And this girl got so nervous, and I just went off on her. And I didn't, you know, it's like, and it was just funny because I just see my sister-in-law peeping out with her coffee, just sipping it, like, this is interesting. I'm just like, you know, I just lost it because that's my thing right there. I'm completely, you know, in a corner by myself, hermit, whatever. I'm happiest when I'm alone or when I'm not doing much. If I am doing anything, I'm happier when I'm doing it alone. And then a complete introvert and everything else that you've mentioned. And so it's just like, it's a weird combination of things. But when I get angry, I don't care who I'm angry with. It will come out. All that will go, like the walls will come down. I will destroy the walls just to show you how angry you just got me. I don't know if you're the same way, but that's for sure something I deal with all the time. I'm an angry introvert.
Yeah, I definitely inherited an anger issue from my father. I have also been described as a human bulldozer, which I put proudly on my Twitter bio because I thought it was a hilarious thing to say, although the person did not mean it as a compliment. But I take it to mean that I will stop at nothing to finish my projects and get stuff done.
That's good.
So that's how I've chosen to rebrand.
That's great.
Human bulldozer comment.
So where can people find you? And I'm going to share a link, and I already have the link to the YouTube video. So where can people find you, and if you want to be found, please share it as we're closing the show.
I definitely want to be found. I am an absolute animal. I mean, I'm very easy to find on the internet, thankfully. One of the the great things about being the only person with my name. But the best places to find my work is you can go to bricastellini.com, which has all of my projects that I've ever done and my various reels and, you know, all the articles that I've written for Starable, my day job. So there are a lot of how-to filmmaking articles, from everything from how to cast to how to write a shot list to how to pick a social media platform to market your web series on. So we've got it all. And
Awesome.
then I'm most active on social media on Twitter. Twitter is my first love, my only love. It's a terrible platform, and I don't know what I would do without it. So I am at Brizone World on Twitter. I'm at Brizone World on every platform. BRISOWNWORLD. So if you find that username on a website, it is me. But for the most part, I'm active on Twitter.
Awesome. So we'll go ahead and make sure that we share all that. Thank you so much for being our guest today. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much for having me.
I hope to have you again. And we're going to talk some more outside of this because it's weird how much we have in common. So thanks, everyone, for listening. Female Filmmakers Fuse. Everyone have a safe and happy Sunday.
You're listening to Female Filmmakers Fuse with Alexa Polar and Robin Pabello, only on LA Talk Radio.